France 24. Um, so we had talked about I think yesterday or the day before, Americans polling on or the polling of Americans uh for the how they feel about Israel. And it's going they're down, people. They're down. Now I always say they could be lower. They could be lower and they should be lower. But the average Americans are not fucking with Israel anymore. But I didn't know this. Apparently, not only is America on fuck Israel clock, but also apparently the EU is also turning their times to fuck Israel clock. So this is mood shifting in Europe, public opinion and governments turning against Israel. Let's see. Let's see if it's just the people or if it's also the governments. Something tells me it's probably the people. I think were already the people, from what I remembered from all the protests, were already pretty pro-Palestine. So maybe this is more about the governments shifting, which is much more important in terms of like imposing material cost on the state of Israel. So let's see what this video is all about.
And for more on this, I can welcome Maya Sion-Sikiyahu, Director of the Israel-Europe Relations Program at the Mitvim Institute and lecturer at the Hebrew University European Forum in Jerusalem. Good morning, Maya.
So we're going to be talking to an actual Israeli. Buckle up, people. Buckle up. Get your like Nazi spin ears on or whatever, like the pro Nazi spin ears. You got to put them on. It's hard to, sometimes it's really hard to understand like Israelis in particular, like their thoughts on stuff, because they're so deep down the pipeline of fascism that their brains are working on it. Like their brains are basically melted at this point. So I'll do my best to try to translate here for you. As someone who listens to Israelis sometimes, I think that I have a way of translating from their Zionism-addled brains into just normal human speak. So here we go.
Hi, and thank you very much for joining us. How closely will Israel be watching today's meeting in Brussels?
Good morning. The diplomats in Israel and the foreign minister of Israel will be watching very closely. Europe has been, the second most important entity or ally of, I wouldn't say ally, but, partner of Israel from economic perspective. It's the first. Also from security perspective, there are very important relations.
Oh, I'm just reading this. Spain calls for suspension, I think, of like trade ties with Israel, which is likely to be blocked. And this is EU reviewing trade links with Israel. I also know that with Hungary's new election, there's a possibility, because Hungary was often a spoiler to these sorts of larger EU decisions to try to distance themselves from Israel. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think other countries will potentially fill its place. But, I think we're getting closer and closer every day to actual material cost being imposed on Israel.
And in you describe it very very well. The agricultural relations, the 70% of the flights going out of Israel goes to Europe, so it's definitely a very important partner of Israel.
Now, Israel,
if 75% of the flights are going to the EU from Israel, you know what would have saved a lot of gas if, instead of putting Israel in the middle of the Middle East and like stealing all that territory from Palestinians, if you had just left it in fucking Germany, like created the state in Germany somewhere, I feel like that would have saved a lot of gas flying back and forth between the EU and Israel.
Israel, particularly under Benjamin Netanyahu, has been largely dismissive of criticism from Europe, viewing it as much less important than the support it gets from the United States. But is this attitude perhaps a bit misplaced?
I believe it is definitely misplaced. You have to take into consideration that the Prime Minister deals mostly with the United States, and it is the Foreign Minister, Gideon Saar, who deals with Europe, with the EU and the other European countries. And yes, but this attitude has, it's a very long attitude of Netanyahu towards Israel that is lasting for more than a decade. And that comes from European former steps against Israel, be it the linkage, which means that there is no upgrade of the agreements as long as what used to be the Middle East peace process would not advance. That was a decision taken in 2008, 2009. Then, there's a series of steps that the EU has taken against the government of Israel.
Okay, okay, come on. The EU has never materially impacted the situation of Israel. Like they have potentially played their part in like quote unquote restraining Israel at strategic points throughout its long history of colonizing the region. But they have never like really been against Israel in any way. That's ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. This is what Zionism does to your brain. If you actually believe that the EU historically hasn't been 100% on the side of Israel, then you're psychotic. Your brain doesn't work anymore.
Or conditioned the relations with Israel, depending on what's going on with the Palestinians. And Netanyahu has been a master in thwarting the EU decision-making against Israel along the years after some decisions were passed. And now it's a struggle. It's a very tough struggle because the public opinion in Europe has turned against Israel for quite a while. And now we see governments in Europe turning against the government of Israel.
And the governments aren't turning against the state of Israel because the people are turning against the state of Israel. The government is finally finding enough wiggle room in that America, like, okay, sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. If America was still as strong and capable as it was, say, 5 years ago, or as it was perceived 5 years ago, before all of this stuff started happening, before Trump 2 and all this stuff, if it was still as like seen as a perfect capitalist neoliberal like ally that is going to step in and daddy US is going to step in and protect Israel and protect the EU from big bad Russia coming across the border or whatever, then they would still be the governments would still be much more aligned with America if that were the case. This is not a just the government starting to catch up to the people. This is the government starting to realize that America isn't as strong as it said it was, and because of that, no longer feeling as like the necessity to be as vassalized to the United States as they did before. In my personal opinion, I think that's more of what's going on here. They feel like they can go against America at least somewhat occasionally every once in a while. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting.
Now, Spain's Pedro Sanchez is urging the EU to suspend its association agreement with Israel. That is probably unlikely to come to pass, but there could be a partial suspension. What might the repercussions of that be for Israel?
So let me just say that Sanchez is indeed the normative voice of Europe, but there is the geopolitical voice of Europe that has been growing along the recent years. And I think the later will win eventually, especially when it comes to, as you said, the suspension of the association agreement. This you need unanimity, and there will not be unanimity for that. But for the other measures that require a qualified majority voting, here we see the Italian stance is not as resilient as it was before, and that's a very disturbing signal to Israel. And that's definitely something that the foreign minister has to take into consideration, and the whole government. So I'm not sure. Look, today is Memorial Day in Israel. We commemorate the memory of over 2,500 soldiers that were killed along since the establishment of the State of Israel.
The 2,500 soldiers killed total. What? It since 1940 whatever, like, or I can't remember exactly what year it was founded, but I thought there were more than that.
Since the establishment of the State of Israel. So, it's a symbolic timing. I don't think any of that would pass. What's more likely to pass in the future is the sanctions against violent settlers that Viktor Orban, Hungary, was vetoing. And then with the qualified majority voting, so
that was one of the things before that, yeah, with Viktor Orban gone, there's more possibilities of actual, like, and all of these consequences are going to be minor compared to like the like when America finally cuts the cord with Israel. But yeah, they are all chinks in the armor though. The more it happens, the more it starts to accelerate and snowball until it becomes too hard to ignore. Just globally, I think. So these are all good developments.
suspension of only parts of the association agreement, like the trade issue, so inflicting customs on Israel. If it requires a qualified majority voting, I think, that would be a struggle for the time being. The diplomats that I'm speaking to from the Israeli and from the European side don't see that coming. So despite the fact that Meloni has shifted and signaled a negative attitude, more negative attitude towards the government of Israel, I think when it comes to this voting, there'll still be a blocking minority in the EU blocking those measures.
Now,
yeah, there very well could be. I'm not saying that all this is going to for sure pass. I do think though, just because of like, the typical sort of like the elites who are in power, who hold power, are still like largely aligned with the colonial like project of Israel. But it's just going to keep getting harder and harder as time goes on, and as public opinion changes more and more, and as America shows how weak it really is I guess not how weak it is, but how incapable it is of actually protecting its allies. I think that, yeah, I just think that it'll slowly start to create the room necessary for the EU to actually vote in a more moral and just way.
the EU is, as we've said, Israel's biggest trading partner. What sort of leverage can it bring to bear on Israel in the event of any particular suspension?
If there will be a suspension of the trade parts, then it means that there will be customs on Israeli export to the EU. That amounts to about 1 billion euros per year. It's quite a significant amount, and that depends very much on the business, on each business, to see whether it takes it out of business, whether the trade agreements they have with the other companies in Europe, does that makes them less profitable, and that has a bearing. But the customs would amount on average to about 4%. It's not a significant amount, allegedly, but again, it's a business-to-business decision. But it sends a very, very strong political signal. I think that is very disturbing.
I think that it would more send a signal to other businesses who are thinking about starting a business in Israel or whatever, that you won't be able to, trade with the EU without having to pay an extra cost. Like, it might be a decision, like a deal breaker between creating your business in Israel versus creating it in EU, which, I mean, honestly, at this point, if you're still creating your business in like Israel and not like, you have to expect to be in a perpetual state of war for the next like 20 years probably. So I think that's a dumb decision to do anyway if you're not an already like, Israeli like Zionist brained business owner or something. Like, I feel like you really should try to stay away from the nation state of Israel. It's only going to become more and more expensive to operate your business there in the future. So
for Israel. For decades, Netanyahu, when he was finance minister decades ago, was saying, Israel has to not put all the trade eggs at the one basket. We need to diversify our trade. And indeed, Israel has managed to diversify to some extent to Asia and to other countries and continents. But the EU is still, for many, many years, is the biggest trading partner. So that's going to be a major, major challenge for Israeli economy nowadays. But again, I don't see this measure going forward. But maybe one note. On the 20th of May last year, the Foreign Affairs Council did pass a decision to review the association agreement, but eventually no step was taken. But what happened was that the Netherlands was the one pushing for this measure, for this decision to be taken at the Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels. And the mood shifted while the discussion was taking place within the room. So we do need to follow very carefully because the mood is shifting against Israel.
And on a
You say, bet they could diversify more if they weren't genocidal. I'm sure they could. I'm sure they could. Unfortunately, though, even China and Russia in particular, like the quote unquote antagonists to America, still invest heavily in Israel. It is kind of a sad state of affairs. Now, I think that they would, if we move to a more multipolar world, then like the power structures and stuff and like the UN, if it was a little bit like had a little more teeth to it, they like those countries might be more willing to pull out of Israel because they're not as invested in the actual, you know, settler colonial project that America is in terms of taking and destabilizing the region and taking the resources from the region. So because China just wants to like trade max with everybody. That's why they trade with Israel. So yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm hopeful for once we get to a more multipolar world that it will be unsustainable for Israel to be able to maintain their current apartheid system. But yeah, we'll see.
separate matter to trade, Israel has faced pushback from countries in Europe in the areas of culture and sport, with several nations boycotting this year's European Song Contest because of Israel's presence. And Ireland has so far unsuccessfully tried to introduce a motion with UEFA to expel Israel from its football competitions. How seriously are these attempts being taken in Israel?
Very seriously. And, you know, it's a bit of maybe an irony because the Israelis are much less aware of the economic implications that EU-Israel relations would have if the suspension of the trade part would take place. But they are very, I think, you know, agitated when it comes to the Eurovision contest and when it comes to football and those issues. And, you know, Israeli diplomacy has a very uphill struggle against those decisions, but so far it has been successful. So we'll have to see, but definitely.
Yeah, they're all pussies, dude. The people at the top of those organizations are all just, you know, they're all just like gimps to America. Like seriously, they don't like they have no no moral compass, no moral will. The entire public of Europe is behind kicking Israel out of Eurovision. Like everybody, nobody wants them to fucking be there. And they have to go through so many hoops. Eurovision has to go through like a million hoops just to protect all of the Israeli, like, you know, the psychotic Israeli, like hooligans that show up and stuff. Or like same with the FIFA. That's an even better one. They have to spend like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on protecting these like goons who just come in and start like beating the shit out of every brown person they see. Like that's like what they have to go through just to allow Israel to stay in like FIFA or whatever. And they still do it because they're so fucking scared of America, man. It is pathetic. It is so pathetic how the EU, like how vassalized they are to American interest. I can't like, especially like the organizations, like the institutions of cultural power. It is sad. It is sad, sad, sad.